Hi there, and welcome to this episode of the Codebreakers, where we are going to be talking about the princess paradigm. I am Stephanie Sims, and I'm thrilled to be joined by Alex, whose name I never get right, but I just call her Alex, and Gina, whose name I don't even attempt because we're on first name basis now. And so, as we were talking, we had a great discussion in the green room, but we think it's going to have to be another show. Although it does have some of the elements of what we want to talk about today. We're super excited to bring you this show, and I don't know, Alex wanted me to introduce it, so I'll tell you a little bit about my thoughts about this whole princess thing, but I really want to hear from Alex and Gina what their idea is, what princess kind of brings up for them. Obviously, the topic kind of comes to a head with Frozen, the movie, which everybody, although not everybody has seen it, everybody has probably at least heard the song or heard someone singing it or talking about it. And it kind of got us thinking, what is it about this princess, about this happily ever after, about this something that's totally removed from your daily life that's so appealing? And why are so many people connecting with that and wanting to be part of it, by creating a video, by singing the song, by buying the doll, or whatever it is? So that is part of what I want to explore. But something I said earlier, I also want to explore what it means to be a princess, because I don't think it's always been a compliment. I think that this is really kind of a relatively new phenomenon of seeing princess as something good, as something that we want to label our girls with. And so I'm hoping we'll get into that a little more later on. But let's hear from, who wants to go first? Alex?
Yeah, I'll go. I mean, when you suggested princesses, I got excited for a couple of reasons. One, the discussion that we were having in the green room was about my love life, or current lack thereof. And I'm really interested in the phenomenon of the happily ever after and how we are passing it on to our kids. And originally, the happily ever after, to me, when I was studying English, it's a way for us to escape reality. These stories were a way for us to escape reality. They were never meant to become our reality. But I have noticed in my own love life that we're expecting the happily ever after more and more to actually be a reality. And so that's the first thing that really caught my attention with this phenomenon of princesses. The second one was thanks to Grizz, or David Wells. He brought up in the group chat, are we going to talk about gender norms? Oh yeah, we are definitely going to talk about gender norms in this, because that's the other thing that really interests me about this, is we're so fascinated by princesses, and little girls are getting more and more attached to the idea of princesses. And what better show to follow our superheroes show, right? Because superheroes are traditionally thought of as men. So why don't our little boys want to be princes? Why don't our little boys dress up as princesses? And why are we encouraging these different gender roles at such a young age? So that's something else that caught my attention with it. And of course, Frozen, I don't even have kids, and I saw it and I heard about it, and I've started to read academic papers about it because it has been just such a big phenomenon. And of course, when I was little, I dressed up as Cinderella. My sister ended up being Belle from Beauty and the Beast. I think it was a hair color thing. Like, I literally think that's what it was. I wanted Cinderella because she was blonde, and when I was little, I was more of a blonde color. And my sister's name is Ari, and she hates Ariel, the Little Mermaid, which everybody likes to call her Ariel. No, it's Ari. Don't ever. But, it's interesting that she attached herself to Belle rather than Ariel, the Little Mermaid. So it's just all of these intricacies that we really don't think about on a regular basis when it comes to princesses, but they're getting more and more popular, and they're pervading our society more and more, and the ideals around princesses, true love, all of those sorts of things, I think aren't just they're going from these escapism, this way to escape reality for a short time, to becoming an expected component of reality. And that is when something really, to me, I'm like, I don't even know if this is just if it's viral or if it's becoming, or if it's so viral it has now become a component of our culture. So that's my long-winded. Princesses are fascinating. That's the short version. Gina, what sparks your interest?
You guys have already covered so much of this. You know, I came up during the second wave of feminism. So for me, princess was a dirty word, essentially. And yeah, I grew up with Cinderella, but my main focus was actually the injustices placed upon her more than the being saved. And it's really interesting. I read that Princess is Disney's largest brand. So really, Princess is a brand. It's something there's an interdependence between the demand and the supply, obviously, but the supply has definitely increased the demand. So now Princess is this completely taken for granted concept, but it wasn't always like this. And it's a really interesting phenomena that's developed over the last probably, I think since around 2000, 2001 is when Disney caught on to this. It was a Disney on Ice, and one of the top guys showed up, and all the girls were dressed in pink and had sort of put together these ad hoc princess costumes, and an idea was born from witnessing that, and obviously it's taken off tremendously. But it's really interesting to me how this has happened. And to me, growing up, princess had to do with entitlement, and it was kind of an ironic entitlement label. And it implied lazy, it implied stupid, it implied vapid, it implied purposelessness, and all the things that I was hoping to grow up not being. So I actually, when I think I was 17 or 18, I decided to read all of the Grimm's fairy tales, and I read every single one of them. And I was just really interested in myths and fairy tales. And even then, the idea, I never made that leap. I had this total disconnect between, oh, princess, I could be a princess. So one of the things that I think has really shifted is that kind of equal opportunity princess concept, where any girl can become a princess now and can have the costume and do the pink and all that stuff. And I think it's a really complicated topic and apparently girls tend to grow out of this and then incorporate, and I can be a princess firefighter, and I can be a princess lawyer or princess surgeon, whatever. But I wonder how it's really affecting their ability, like you said, Alex, an idea of reality, this happily ever after myth, which is something that I did grow up with. You meet the right guy, you settle down, and all is bliss after that. And we grow up to find out that that's not exactly true, and that love isn't really enough. And okay, I'm getting on a steamroll here. There you go, though. That's my introductory comment. That's enough for now.
Well, there's tons there, and obviously we had started the conversation in the green room, but maybe the right place to start, just hearing what everybody has to say, is with, I don't want to say the gender norms, but with this notion of what does it mean? What does it mean now to be a princess, and what does that look like? And what did it mean? Gina and I think are a lot closer in age than Alex, but do we have different perceptions, and is it really one of these phenomenons that comes and goes, and this just happens to be the time of the princess, and in 10 years it's not going to be a big deal? Or is it something that's going to be lasting, and we need to worry about it in the sense of, hey, it's going to have a big impact on the way that these girls look at their lives?
That's a loaded question. Intensely loaded. I mean, I can speak of, I guess, I can't speak of little girls now, but for girls of my generation, 90s kids, yeah, boy bands were more a big thing for us, but princesses too. I think that, I think Gina's right when she says that we kind of grow out of it at a certain age, but I'm worried with, I mean, when I was, really, Tigger's gonna itch himself right now. When I was younger, it was, I guess you would say the tradition, I mean, it was still Cinderella, Belle. We didn't have all of these new versions of princesses, like Frozen. Brave is a really interesting one. The person in Brave, I don't know her name. I don't remember.
I think it's Madeira is her name.
Madeira, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And Tangled. Tangled was another,
right.
That was start.
Rapunzel.
Yeah, which was Rapunzel, but it was a complete twist on the Rapunzel story.
Right. So we have all of these new versions, and what I guess what concerns me about girls growing up today is that they're being more inundated with the idea of princess than I was at a young age. I mean, I grew up in a my dad didn't really, he never called me princess. He called me spoiled sometimes. Which fair enough, but he never called me princess. He never called me words that would distinguish, I guess, that are associated with a specific gender. He would call me Alex. He called me by my name. I mean, yeah, if he introduced me to other people, he would say, "This is my daughter." So I guess that would distinguish my gender. But he never called me anything that would indicate that I am. I mean, he never, even when I was little, he never focused on my beauty. Other people would say, "Oh, you have such a beautiful daughter," but he would never say, "You're such a beautiful girl. You're such a beautiful woman." It was always, "Oh, you did so well in school. Oh, you're doing so well in your science classes." I started out as a scientist, believe it or not. Totally love science. Not so much today. So, I mean, I think I grew up in a less traditional household in that sense, but I still think that my generation, we still, even though we had that princess phenomenon, I don't think it reached the peak that we're at today. I think today it's so, and maybe it is Disney. I hate, pointing the finger at Disney, but I am worried. I am worried about what it's going to do for girls, not necessarily when they're little, but once they reach my age, once they reach their mid-20s, and they're looking, and they're at the point where they're looking for a mate, and they're looking for someone that they actually want to spend the rest of their life with. I am a little bit concerned. I mean, our divorce rates even today, not good. Not good. So I'm like, is it going to get worse?
Well, and just one question for you. I hear what you're saying about the whole, traditional kind of adopting the happily ever after perspective. Is part of what's happening, though, not necessarily that there is relatively more princess today, but just that there is more media today. For example, I look at my girls. I have an 11-year-old and a 6-year-old. My 11-year-old, she don't really care about princesses anymore. She's totally done with that phase, not at all in her brain, but she watches a ton of YouTube, right? So she's looking at people like Bethany Moda, or she's looking at other people who have a perfect life, even though they're not princesses. So is part of the phenomenon not necessarily princesses per se, but the fact that there is so much more media presenting things in such a beautiful light, and we don't see the backstory, like we were talking about in the green room. The end of the book always ends when they shut the door and they're living happily ever after, and nobody sees when they wake up in the morning and he's pissed off because she stole the covers in the night. And so is some of that a symptom of the fact that there's just more media still presenting this whole perfect story, whether it's princesses or something else?
Well, there's more media and there's also more product. So the consumerism is out the roof. I mean, in 2006, there were 25,000 princess products. So that was a while ago. How many are there now? I didn't find a number on that, but you have a number?
No, I was just going to say there's at least 5 aisles at Target. I can't tell you that.
Okay, well, so there's this interdependence between the media and the consumer products, and they're both just building on each other and escalating the issue. I mean, it used to be that a little girl would go into the preschool and run over to the dress-up corner and have all kinds of choices. And now I wonder how many choices there really are. And, you know, obviously some schools are going to be more progressive than others. But even the peer pressure for Pink and Princess and enacting and play acting that role. So I think your impetus to talk about the definition, how do we define princess, you know, I think that's really, really important, because maybe that's going to be the way to help steer things in a direction that's healthiest. Maybe not healthy totally, but healthier than it currently is. And that's to start focusing on how girls are defining the word princess. You know, what does that actually mean to them? Is it really just about really pretty pink clothes and frills and tiaras and that joy of embellishment, or is it those bottom line dreams? Are we changing their dreams? And I kind of hope not. Although, you know, I do believe in true love. So it's kind of this funny, and I did meet my true love quite young. But it's still not happily ever after. It's still a lot more complicated and a lot more complex than we walk into it thinking. And I can still remember, I was maybe 22 when it hit me what a perfect relationship wasn't. And I panicked because I had had this ideal in my mind of what it meant. And it meant never disagreeing, never fighting, not having conflict, and always feeling loved every single moment of every single day. And the ways in which that was proven were different for me at a younger age as well. And I just going to the core of what princess means, I think would be a really great thing to do.
Absolutely. I'm gonna pull up some comments. Some of them funny, some of them just kind of interesting. So Dave Pipe says, "Does Disney have to pay royalties to the countries still governed by sovereigns?" I just think that's hilarious. They should. They should.
Well, maybe that's why we haven't seen a remake of any of the traditional fairy tales, because there's some sort of link. You know, the current royal families could say that story's about me, and so they just do princesses, so they didn't have to worry about that.
But you know, that does actually bring up a really good point, and that is Kate.
Right. Or Diana before her.
Yeah, because their stories, or the way at least that the media portrays their stories, really aids this idea of happily ever after, finding your prince even though you weren't born a princess, right? I mean, the royal wedding, oh my gosh. I'm an American. I don't care about the royal family. I'm sorry, guys. It's just not my thing. I could not avoid watching the royal wedding. It was everywhere. If I didn't watch it, it was in magazines. It was all over the media. It was everywhere. It was in my Twitter feed. I couldn't avoid it because it really fed into this idea that it can happen, and it can happen to an ordinary person. Well, if you look at Kate's education and her family, what they call a cottage there is definitely what I would call a cottage in the U.S., right? I mean, they say that she comes from this humble background, but I'm like, really? But the media makes it sound like it could be anybody. So I think that it does actually connect. Jessica Maynard, this is kind of a long one, but she says, "I have two nieces. A few years ago, the older was so sad about Halloween because all she had at her house was princess costumes, none of which she wanted to wear. Luckily, my other sister has 3 boys, and she ended up being a Viking that year." That's awesome. The younger is on board and completely loves the princesses. They are about 10 and 8 years old. So that goes to Gina's comment about, is it going to become the only thing that they can dress up as? David Wells, or Grizz, says, I haven't seen Frozen or Tangled, but both Brave and Maleficent, I have no idea if I said that right, seem to be removed from the dependence on princes. Is that a trend? What does it indicate?
I think there's still a hidden story. It's less apparent, less obvious, and less on the surface. But the love interest is still there, and the seeking for the happily ever after is still tied to that final joining with a partner. So it's still there. It's definitely improving. I mean, the fact that it's hidden now, as opposed to just completely the point of the story, is absolutely an improvement and a bit of progress. But I think that a lot of audiences are being fooled, and they're missing the point that it's still there. So, we still have the scoundrel who let her down, who lied to her. I'm talking about Frozen, and we still have the kind of goofy, nice but not immediately apparently attractive as a partner guy who she ends up with in the end. The one that's better for her but maybe too nice, and because women aren't supposed to really like the nice guys, right? So I don't know, David. I think it's still there. I think there's a shift occurring, but it is still there. And there was something really interesting in another article that I read about that talked about neuroplasticity, and that kind of goes to the question of, do girls outgrow this, or is this kind of play and obsession actually changing their brains, changing their minds, and imprinting this particular information? Humans have always gravitated towards it's the hero's journey. It's the archetype of the princess and the prince and the dragon and the good guy and the villain, and these things are inherently human, that we're going to be attracted to these kinds of stories and use them to help our own development, use them to almost provide solace for our predicaments and dreams for our potential. It's kind of like what we do with them, and each century's, each decade's interpretation of that or use of that is going to impact our humanity. And obviously we've never seen a time like this where the consumerism is just so huge and the pressure is so huge.
Well, but one question, and I agree with what you're talking about, Gina, but I guess the question is, does this myth, this happily ever after myth, does it ever really go away, right? Because if you look, for example, at romance novels, if you look at a ton of movies that come out of Hollywood, not at all for kids, for grown-ups, right? All of that is also perpetuating this notion that the goal of your life, to be happy, is you find a partner, you settle down, you have kids, and you're happily ever after. That's what your life is supposed to look like, right? And so anything that deviates from that is immediately seen, I think, as, now at least I think we call it different. Before we would have called it weird or abnormal or something else. So we're making progress. But is the reason that we stick to those storylines so closely, with minor modifications along the way, because people just won't accept anything else? They wouldn't even receive the message if we spun it another way.
I think at bottom line, humans want a partner. They want, I think it just goes to some of our deepest desires to be witnessed, to be connected, to be close, to procreate. So, yeah, I don't think it is going to go away. It's just kind of how will it morph and what will we do with it?
Well, and what Gina pointed to, the hero's journey, or for anyone that studies English, they call it the Bildungsroman. it's an integral part of storytelling, a lot of storytelling. I mean, the first piece of British literature, Beowulf, was a Bildungsroman, and we have carried that tradition. So it's totally normal in storytelling, but again, storytelling started as a way for us to temporarily escape reality and connect with other people through the story. But once the story ended, we went back to reality. So that's what's interesting for me, is that we're meshing these two, and I think it might be because of the amount of media that we have today. And I'm always pro media. I defend the media like crazy because it is a supply and demand. But I think the fact that we do, I mean, it's not even just television anymore. We now spend a lot of our time online, and still, even with television, a lot of research shows that the majority of at least Americans are watching 3 or 4 hours of TV every day. Still. So we're still being inundated with these messages, and I think it's diluting that line between reality and what was previously seen as a way for us to escape reality, but to come back afterwards, right? And this kind of goes into, Jessica Maynard said a little while ago, and I think this is a really great question. I know it is there, i.e. media availability of products, but don't we have a choice as to how we raise our girls? What we teach them about who they are, what love is and isn't. We can tell them the truth and should. I am not a parent, so I am not touching this question. But I would like Stephanie to.
Yeah, and first I want to say thank you to Jessica for being here, but also for making this comment, because ultimately that's where, even if we can't affect a huge societal change right away, that's where every one of us can do something, right? If we raise our girls and boys with the expectation that being part of a partnership is a partnership. That means both of you are going to have to work. Sometimes you're going to have to do stuff you don't like, but that's what being a family or being a partner is. Then over time, these small changes that we're seeing appearing in the media, like the true love's kiss is not what saves the day in Frozen, those can maybe become more prevalent because you've got more people out there who look at that and say, oh, that's what I think love is. That's what I think, or that's what I want to see other people enacting. Because I think, like you said, it's a codependent relationship, right? They wouldn't make a movie if people wouldn't go to see it, so they can't make something that's so far out of bounds no one wants to see it. But some people see the movie and are exposed to an idea they hadn't had before. So it's nice to kind of keep pushing the boundary, but ultimately it comes from people being open to those messages. And so I think as a parent, you have to raise your kids so that they can actually be more realistic about what it means to be in a relationship. And I say that as somebody who has no idea if I've done a good job of that or not. We'll only know when my kids get married, or maybe not even then. I don't know.
Well, and I'm not a parent either, so I can't speak to it as intimately as you do, but I think it will be a marvelous occurrence when we can teach our girls that they can let it go and be truly themselves without it having to do with being ostracized because of an affliction. I mean, really, she reaches that pinnacle of being able to become who she truly is because she has to disconnect from everyone she loves, and she has to go away because she does things, because being herself is harmful for those that she loves. And what a terrible message that is, right? I mean, we'd like to kind of head that one off at the pass so that we're helping people to believe that they can be who they are without that separation, without that kind of crisis of identity because you're dangerous. Who you really are is dangerous, so you need to go away, and then you can feel the freedom to be who you are because you're not going to hurt anyone around you because you'll be totally isolated. So that's a really bizarre inverted message, and apparently Frozen is partially so popular because it does kind of it makes an allowance for people to fill in the blanks of, my true self is that I'm a lesbian and I really want to be able to declare who I really am, or my true self is actually struggles with depression and I want to feel comfortable and free to admit that and name that. So, paired with what you're describing, Stephanie, I think it's going to be really important that, it's the same, change one life, change the entire world. We each have our personal responsibility, and the best impact we can make will be on a one-to-one. And that'll kind of mushroom out from there.
Right. Well, and I like what you said, Gina, about this notion of journey. There were really two journeys, right, in the movie. There was Anna's journey, which ultimately was depending on who you talk to, was the real plot of the story. But then there was also Elsa's journey, right? And while the isolation piece of it, I think was hard for my girls, especially my youngest, to understand, she really appreciated the notion that true love, in this case the sister's love, is what actually helped Elsa be who she really was and come back, right? Recognize that, in fact, there's nothing wrong with her. It was how she felt about herself that created the problem. It was the fact that she was repressing and that she wasn't being who she really was that kept her afraid and that made her feel like she had to isolate herself, when had she accepted the love, that would have solved the problem from the start. So personally, I really like the movie. I'm concerned about the fact that my girls only want to wear Elsa, or that my little one only wants to wear Elsa. But I think that when you talk about it and you're able to kind of pick the little lessons out of it, maybe it's a good thing that it stays around longer. Because if it was just a movie and they never remembered it and they never asked questions about it, those opportunities to talk about these different elements would never come up. And then you'd have a harder time maybe talking about it.
So you feel like, in a way, the movie's given you a platform for discussing these issues and working on them with your girls. That's incredible, right?
Yeah. Well, and I think what's interesting is, as I parent, that is my perspective. What show or what element of media is my child going to be exposed to that I can then use as a way to get them into a conversation about a subject that's important? It's the same thing with my son, even though it's not a princess movie.
That's great. I was reading a couple of articles by Peggy Orenstein, who wrote the Cinderella is Killing My Daughter or something. I can't remember the exact title, but she's always worked with gender issues, and she's a feminist, and that her whole life's work has been around this stuff. So then she has a daughter, and her daughter at 3 really is attracted to all the girly pink princess, the whole deal. And she's constantly kind of trying to refocus her daughter's attention elsewhere, to the point where she finally realizes that her daughter is thinking mommy is saying it's not okay to be a girl, because she's so fully associated princess and pink and girly and all of this stuff with what it means to be a girl, that her mother's disapproval ends up going straight to her own gender identity. And that's when Peggy kind of went, wow, I got to step back from this a minute and kind of think, well, maybe we're okay. Maybe this will be okay. It's got to be. It's really interesting.
Yeah, the real difficulty with gender norms, right, is that you have to try to not push too hard in either direction. It's so difficult because you want to leave it open, but the minute that you see someone, especially if you are like a hardcore feminist that's like, I don't believe in gender norms, it's really hard if you have someone in your life that is fitting the norm so perfectly that you're like, no, they got to you, and it's really hard to step back and say, maybe it's a choice. Maybe it's their choice. Maybe they do actually really like pink, right? So it's a really, really hard line to walk. And one of I have the perfect example. I have a friend who she graduated grad school last summer, and she just had her first baby. She never wanted kids, but she just had her first baby. And when she was getting ready for the baby, she's the funniest person ever. Like she was so honest about her pregnancy. She was like, "This is the worst experience of my life. It's terrible. Anybody that tells you that pregnancy is awesome is the biggest liar in the world." And it was great. But one of the things that she ran into when she was having her baby shower, she didn't want one, but her mom insisted on it. And she asked all of her friends to get her gender neutral things, because in communication we study, what messages we're sending with everything we do. And she already knew that she was having a little girl. Everybody knew that she was having a little girl. So she got backlash from a lot of her friends saying, well, you're going to confuse her. If you get her blue things and green things, you're going to confuse her. And she's like, what? No, it's not that I'm not trying to confuse her. I'm leaving her open to, these are colors. You are welcome to enjoy whatever. But even that minute moment of her trying to set up an environment that is gender neutral, she got backlash from those people in her life saying that you're going to confuse her. People really do believe that if you don't tell her pink is a girly color, she's going to end up a lesbian. Like, that's crazy to me. That's it. Like, I'm like, really?
Well, and I think some of it is just where people are in their journey, right? And that's the part that's hard, just like you were saying. It's okay, I'm wearing pink, right? Okay, I am so far from a girly girl. This is probably the girliest thing I own. You can see it. It's like a sweatshirt, but it just happens to be pink, right? But there are people who genuinely like the color, and so how do you tell the difference between someone who's just expressing their preference? I want to buy your little girl something super frilly because I personally like frills, and I think you need to put her in something frilly because otherwise she's not a girl. What it brought up for me, though, Alex, and I think I'd love to hear what you guys think about this, is this idea that, in fact, all of this is happening between women. Like, even the princess stories, if you look, most of the time, the men, they're like secondary, tertiary. Sometimes they're not even there. Like the original Snow White, the only men were the dwarves. You see the prince, I don't even know that we know his name. He's the prince, and he only comes in at the very last scene. And so is part of what's happening the fact that because women are raising the families, and that's changing, but because historically we've been in charge of raising children, and these are the stories that we appreciate, or our perception of the world, even if we'd like to change it, is that why this is so powerful? Because we're reinforcing it, and there's no second voice, right? We're not asking the guys what they think, because I think most guys, I don't know, I can't speak for guys. Anyone in the audience, Dave probably, anyone speak out. But do you guys dream of marrying a princess? Is that like the goal of your life? If I could marry, someday my princess will come? I don't think so. I don't think guys are raised with that. And so is part of the problem us, right? Are we not letting go of this, or are we doing something in our perpetuation of what true love means that makes this so powerful?
Dave, Grizz, Nick actually just showed up. All of you guys, can you please answer that question? Because I am really interested in your answer to that question. Because again, Stephanie, that is a fantastic question. And I'm thinking of like, Grizz brought up a comment a little while ago saying that he liked that Brave brought up arranged marriages. And I think that's a good point, and it fits in well with this question, because it's interesting to see this. I mean, even if you look at really old traditions of marriage where, they had to have a dowry to marry. I mean, it's I don't know. We were seen as objects for a long time, and I would argue that we still see ourselves as objects, unfortunately, women in particular, but men also. But we have this dichotomy, right? So we're objects to be sold to the highest bidder, but we're telling these stories of our ability to become princesses. They seem that they're very different ideas, right? So maybe it is that we're so thrilled to see stories from our point of view that we're focusing less on the other issues that they bring up. I don't know.
Well, I'm not sure that being property by becoming a wife is all that different from the princess ideal. I think those actually go quite well together, because it's all about disempowerment. And so what's interesting about these more current movies is that we're starting to change the archetype with these movies. But I'm also, so I like David's comment about he's comfortable fantasizing about marrying into wealth. Well, you know what? Me too. My husband and I always had this joke about we each thought we were going to get a wife, and we each thought we were going to marry someone rich, and then we ended up with each other instead. But so neither of us got that fantasy. But it is interesting how growing up when I did, coming of age when I did, the shift, the sort of at first subtle shift, but then more prominent shift into where we are now, there was a point at which it was a relief to be able to feel feminine. And it was a relief to be able to wear pink. And not, it was a really, banned color in my personal culture. And so there has been a little bit of expansion and kind of freedom building in being able to encompass all of what it might mean to be female. And even enjoying, to a point, being taken care of as part of that. Whereas when I was 20, if somebody dared to think they were going to take care of me, forget it. I mean, I just had no interest in that whatsoever. So,
yeah,
if we could just strike a good balance here, and it would be fabulous.
Well, and what's interesting, Gina, because you and I grew up we're kids of the 70s, basically, and 70s/80s.
I think I have a few years on you, but yeah.
Maybe. Okay, well, in any case, I had my fair share of khaki and brown and orange. And those are not colors that look good on me. Those are not colors I like. And so I was like you. I was very happy when, finally when I got to be 30 or whatever, nobody was looking at me like, oh my God, what's wrong with you? You're wearing pink, or because you wanted to put a necklace on. That doesn't mean that you're going to sell your soul. Or makeup, exactly. There was a time, and not everyone remembers, but there was a time when that made you, into somebody who was only looking for a guy to take care of them.
Right.
At a certain point, I went to school at a time when lots of people were accused of going to college to get their MRS degrees.
Yep.
Because they clearly weren't smart enough to be in college on their own, so they had to be there looking for a husband.
Yeah, and I made it just under the line on that because I met Doug in my last semester. I've always joked about that.
But so it's interesting. I guess my question is, and I haven't looked at the comment page to see if anybody answered our question about whether men dream of marrying princesses. But my question is really, is this something? Are we perpetuating the myth, right? By the fact that we believe in true love, and by the fact that what we really long for is a true partnership, and because that's not a clear-cut thing, because what a true partnership is to me may not be what it is to Alex or to Gina or to anybody else, these myths continue because nobody else is out there saying, no, that's not the way it should be like this.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
Do we have any idea what very young girls, what princess means to them, other than the decorations? Do we have any, does anybody know about that? Because I certainly don't.
That's really, so Cheryl Deuce says, do you think princess can be uniformly defined for all people, though? I think we can have our own definition of what princess is. After all, it is just a word. And I think that, I can't say what princess means for little girls because I am not a little girl. But something that caught my attention that has to do with Princess is the Fuck Hate campaign. I don't know if you guys have seen it. They've done 2 different videos now, and the first one was these girls. The second one is too. The second one is much more controversial, but the first one is really about they're dressed up as princesses, and they're these little girls that are dressed up as princesses, and the entire video is them saying we should be more focused on the fact that you guys are putting us into this gender box than the fact that we are little girls swearing. And
I didn't know the name of that.
Yeah, it's a
very cool video.
Yeah, it's the Fuck Hate campaign, and I love that it allows me to say fuck hate.
Yeah, my favorite word.
It's great. Yes. But that really caught my attention because it made me think of it made me realize that little girls are thinking, my traditional idea of is they're not thinking about what princess means to them. They're just dressing up as a princess. But that campaign made me kind of realize, like, no, you know what? They are thinking about what it means to be a princess. So I think that it would be really interesting to find out what it does mean to them. I mean, does it mean this empowerment? Or does it mean finding true love? Or does it mean, discovering who you are through being a princess? I don't really know.
Yeah, or is it part of the sexualization, and they think that that's the only thing that's going to make them attractive, and that's the way to true beauty and being accepted and revered and honored?
Well, or do they see it as something that makes them feel special? Like when we were talking about what's the definition of princess? Well, for me, for example, and I don't think anybody can define it for anybody else. We can only talk about what it means to us. But for me, if I had a guy that treated me like a princess, well, it kind of has this notion of pampering, of somebody who wants you to be special, who really has your best interests at heart and wants to help you achieve them, which, frankly, I don't see as a bad recipe for partnership if both of you come into it with that notion. The problem is if one of you comes into it with the notion that that's how it's supposed to work and the other one's there to do it, and you don't have any responsibilities to them, things can go wrong.
Right.
And so, I don't know, having my little one feel like she's special, having any of my kids feel like they're special, I want them to feel special. I want them to feel their power as well, to feel like they have a choice, they make a difference. And if that means pink is their color, then that's super. But I think it's hard when they're exposed to things that tell them this is the path, right? This is what it looks like. This is how you're supposed to do it. As a parent, I think it can go wrong pretty quickly if you're not talking about it and understanding that, oh, that's what they think, and they think that's the only way to achieve it.
Right. And that's funny, because when I was little, I completely resisted it. I didn't start wearing makeup until I was 20 because I resisted the idea of being girly. I didn't wear dresses until I was in my late teens, and only when I had, special events that I had to go to. I still don't like heels because, they're gorgeous and adorable, but it's not worth the pain for me. It's just I've always resisted the idea of being very feminine, and I think it's because I was fed the idea that these are the things that you do to be feminine, and I was like, well, then I'm not gonna do any of them, right? And then as I got older, I was like, well, but I kind of like makeup. Well, but dresses are really comfortable. So as I got older, I moved past the idea of the connection between these things and what it means to be feminine, and I just figured out what I liked for myself. So I think there's the flip side of that too, where it's telling some girls this is what you have to do, and there are going to be these girls that are like, well, I'm not going to do any of that, and it's still affecting your identity. It's still affecting the way that you carry yourself. So a couple of the answers that we got: Dave Pipe, this guy, not marrying a princess, now someone who owns a brewery would be good. I agree, Dave Pipe. I would love to marry someone who owns a brewery. I've got Nick Stephanie, I'll be honest, I'm sort of afraid to actually join in this conversation. I'm more or less just here to listen and learn. Yeah, I've talked to Nick a little bit about gender norms, and he's just his biggest concern is that he comes off as someone that truly believes in gender norms, and it's just that he struggles with the complexity of the difference between gender norms and equality, because he believes in equality, but he also sees cultures where people who fit gender norms function just fine, and they're totally happy. So he's just struggling with the complexity of things, which who isn't? Okay, those are the responses I have so far.
Okay, so it's not a very conclusive. It's certainly not a scientific survey, but it looks like guys are not desperate to marry princesses nearly as much as girls are desperate to marry princes. Can we say that?
But I am interested in. I wonder if the men in our audience would be willing to weigh in on this. What's their definition of a princess? Because I feel like at least men of my age, when they hear the word princess, they hear high maintenance.
That's funny because we were talking about that in the green room. We were talking about like Breakfast Club, right? If you've seen the movie Breakfast Club,
oh my God, one of my
was
favorites.
a princess, and they hated her for that.
Yes.
Like nobody wanted to be with the princess, and so it's kind of weird, right? This ever-changing definition. Now it's good. Now it's bad. Now it's.
Yeah, and also your point, Stephanie, about the fact that it seems to be primarily women who are having the conversation. And it's kind of the culture of women as it's kind of come up. And I think the couple of unscientific answers that we got kind of prove that. They can make a joke. It's clear they haven't thought about it. It's kind of off the top of their heads, whereas you ask a woman and there's all this depth to the response.
Right.
It's important to us.
I mean, that's interesting because it kind of. This is going to get a little bit political, but I mean, it kind of suggests that it's our responsibility to change and shape the narrative around princesses. But when you look at companies like Disney, the higher ups, the ones who make the decisions, are primarily men. So we are being fed stories about. We are being fed narratives that we discuss and that we personally, that shape our lives by a lot of men. I mean, I know women are, I know that they're getting up there, but still traditionally, a lot of these larger media companies are run by wealthy older men.
And Frozen, the screenplay was written by a woman, by the way.
Right.
And that was my question too, is that a reflection of the actual content, Alex, or is that more a reflection of the bottom line? Because my argument would be the guy at the top or the girl has an obligation to make as much money as possible for their company. And so if they know that they have, I don't know what the demographic is, 15 million American girls under the age of 6 that are going to go out and buy all this stuff, I don't want to say they wouldn't care because they have a responsibility, but ultimately, if princesses are what those girls want, princesses are what those girls are going to get. Or if the moms of those girls will take them to see Frozen and will buy them the dresses and will take them to the tea parties and all that, then that's what is going to get produced. That's what's going to get paid for.
Ooh, okay. We have thank you for being honest, Grizz. I think if I'm really honest about it, my primary use of the term princess is a put down for someone who seems overly entitled. That's what I was expecting.
Okay.
And that's where I come from too, also.
Right. And that's very funny, right? That we would choose that label for our daughters. And I say this ironically, I don't call my girls princesses, but you know what I mean, that we as a group, as a society would say, let's do this, let's dress them this way, and let's help them embrace this personality. if we've got a lot of people out there who see that as something negative.
Well, I wonder if the disconnect there is that our perception of a princess may be that they're someone that's entitled, but everybody actually secretly does want to be entitled.
I
So
think
they're
that's
happy to adopt that.
Right. I think that's a good point. And that was one of my questions, you know, also as we thought about this show, which, oh my gosh, we're already at an hour. We're going to have to wrap it up. But is what's happening now actually a good thing? It's a democratization, if you will, of something that used to be attainable only by birth. Right? It used to be you could only be a princess if you were born into the right family. You had nothing to do with it. Your personal merit, any work you did, none of it had anything to do with it. Now you can be a princess by, you know, and if you look at some of Disney, there are plenty of their books that talk about what is a princess, right? A princess is kind, a princess is caring, a princess is giving. They're really doing what they can to give the label a positive spin, which I think might be a good thing. You know, if you want to call yourself a princess or a humanitarian or whatever you want to call yourself, if you're out there doing good in the world, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I would never call myself a princess. I'm more prone to say, yeah, you know what, I'm a daddy's girl, than call myself a princess, which is a whole new bucket of worms for sure.
It's pretty wormy in there.
Yeah.
It is. All right, so we have 2 minutes. We should do final thoughts. Who wants to go first? Not it.
No, you thought of it. You thought of it, Alex. You go first. And I had to open, so it's definitely not me.
Man. All right. Final thoughts. Wow, it's really hard to have final thoughts on such it's such a large topic. And though we didn't talk specifically about what makes this viral, I think that a lot of the things that we hit on definitely indicate why this is a viral idea. And the interesting thing about princesses, this is what I want to leave it at, the interesting thing about princesses and being viral is that it's much deeper than a lot of the other things that we have seen go viral. It's a much deeper idea. And though on the surface we see it as very simplistic, I think it will be interesting to see how such a deep topic continues to be a component of our culture, or if it doesn't. I think it'll be really interesting. Those are my final thoughts.
I guess you'd like me to go, huh? You know, I don't have final thoughts because I really just have endless questions when it comes to this topic, and it's a continually unfolding discovery for me. And I love the questions, and I think that it's great that we're asking them. And I think one of the reasons that this kind of viral is so different is that because it really does go to our very core archetypes, human archetypes, and I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon. It'll just continue to shift and morph, and it just brings up so much. We could do, 3 days on this and continue to have questions that aren't answered. But I'm really appreciative of the fact that we are asking them. And I think that that's, if Disney is making some improvements and things will continue to shift and the consciousness will continue to be raised if we keep contributing to the dialogue. And to me, that's what's most important. So.
Well, I want to say thank you first to Gina and Alex for hanging out with us again, with me. And it's always fun. I love talking to you guys. It would be, I know we can't ever do a show where we come in on time because we always have so many things that we think of while it's happening. But I also really appreciate you guys taking on the topic because I know sometimes it makes people a little uncomfortable. And I am kind of like Gina in the sense that I don't really have any kind of quick summary because I think it's something that's going to change, hopefully continuing in the direction it's going now. But I really liked the points that were brought up, particularly with the parents in the audience, where you guys were mentioning that what we need to really do is make sure that we are opening a dialogue, that we are talking to our kids, and that we're trying to help them understand what this all means, and we're listening to what it is that they want. Because as long as we're trying to help them figure out what's right for them, whether it's princess or fireman or whatever it is, then we're on the right path. And I think with love and with openness, that's going to work out just fine. So that's my thought. If anyone has other questions, I've got tons of research that we did for this show that we're happy to share in the comments. And if you guys want to keep the conversation going, we would love to meet you in the comments and have that happen. So thanks so much to everyone for watching us today on Codebreakers, and we will see you guys. I don't know that we will see you next week, but I think someone will see you next week. So have a great day.